Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way up to 2023 and review them. And this one is actually a bit of a fan favorite among some people in the Doctor Who community. Death to the Daleks. Certainly a bit of a fan favorite among the Big Finish crew, as in the people making Big Finish. I like it. I like it a lot. It's a nice, fun, easy Dalek story. It's not, the best Dalek story ever made. It's not the worst Dalek story ever made. Hardly that. But I mean, it's a nice Saturday afternoon popcorn Dalek story with Daleks in it. I mean, true to form, the Daleks barely even show up until like the end of the first part, and it's only a four-parter. So, like I said, it's an easy, very digestible Dalek story. Starting us off, this is another one of those episodes that have the trend that I really like of picking up where the previous episode left off. The previous episode saw the Doctor finally bringing Sarah Jane back home, back to Britain, back to her home time, and then slightly suggesting that he can take her to all kinds of places, and he name drops a place called Florana, which we then later in the beginning of the next episode we see the Doctor and Sarah Jane preparing for vacation on Florana, only to discover, to their shock and horror, that they landed on a completely different planet, which, as we later find out, is called Exelon. Now, let's talk a little bit about Exelon itself as a planet. First of all, there's a lot of lore building in this one episode. I mean, I keep saying this, that's what Terry Nation does the best. And we still got the best yet to come in the next season. But this one, like I said, even for an episode like this, the lore building of the planet Exelon with the sentient city and just the design of the city. The city looks amazing. I'll talk more about it in a minute. But also just the idea that the Exelons used to be probably the most advanced race in the universe, or at least parts of the universe, maybe even just that one galaxy. They built empires throughout the stars before most sentient species even developed basic speech or whatever. I feel like I might be taking a little bit too far, but that's more or less something that was said in the episode. So, and then they just reverted back to a primitive, superstitious race. I mean, that's a concept we've seen in Doctor Who multiple times, even in the John Pertwee era. But I always find that part of Doctor Who very fascinating. I mean, as we move forward and advance with our own technology, and we feel like we're the most advanced that we'll ever be, it's hard for most of us to ever imagine the idea that this something like this would actually happen, that actually would revert back to a more primitive state. It can happen, and Doctor Who shows that so many times. In fact, there's a Doctor Who companion who kind of represents a bit of that aspect in the next Doctor, obviously, but not the next Doctor episode, the next Doctor after Pertwee. But I always find that whenever they do stuff like that in Doctor Who, I love it. I always find it very fascinating. How could such an advanced species become this, like what happened to the Exelons? And there's always a reason for that. This time, it's, of course, the city. But we're still not talking about the city just yet. We're talking about the human characters in this episode. And this kind of begs the question of the timeline of this episode, because it kind of feels like it's still around the area of the Earth Empire, Earth Gov, whatever you want to call it, the first great and powerful human empire. Again, whichever way you want to call it. So it's definitely after. I mean, they mentioned the last Dalek War, which could mean a lot of things. This could mean it's after the Dalek invasion of Earth, but I doubt it because of how advanced space travel is in this time period. So maybe this is the same Earth Gov that we've seen in both the Mutants and Frontier in Space, and maybe the Dalek invasion from Planet of the Daleks was actually successful, or at least from Frontier in Space. So maybe the Dalek invasion was successful, and this is like several years after the fact. I mean, one of the characters even mentions that his father was killed in the last Dalek Wars. I mean, there's just so much Doctor Who lore that's completely missing, and you have to fill in the blanks, maybe with some novels and comics, or maybe just even your own fan canon. But it's very fascinating to keep learning about these different points in Doctor Who that could potentially connect to one another. And something else that really connects, and this is why there's another reason why I think it's related to the Frontier in Space timeline, is because they're talking about the space plague. There's this mention of the space plague, which was heavily referenced in Frontier in Space. The whole reason that they're on this planet is because they're searching for, can't remember the name of the mineral right now, but they're searching for a mineral, that chemical, I should say, that can cure the people infected by the space plague, which of course we later in the episode learn was made by the Daleks. Now, what the actual space plague is, I mean, that's pretty much the Daleks' modus operandi: bombard the planet with plague missiles, let the majority of the population die out, and then swoop in and invade the planet. That it's a method that I think they've used in the Dalek invasion of Earth, and they keep using it apparently. So again, this could be either Dalek invasion of Earth or right after Frontier in Space. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the timeline of this. As far as the human characters, they're very slightly similar to the Thal characters from Planet of the Daleks. You know, Captain Dead, next in seniority, takes the place, and then he also dies, and then the guy who's the most unfit to lead them and ends up being the guy that leads. I mean, it's another one of those generic team of specialists that the Doctor just finds, and he uses them to help him fight off the Daleks. I think I prefer the Thals from the Planet of the Daleks episode. They were a lot more interesting and a lot more enjoyable to watch. These guys just kind of feel a little bit bland. I mean, other than like the one guy taking over after the captain died, disobeying his orders, and taking on the leadership role himself without telling anybody. Other than that, and just that one line of the guy saying that his father died in the last Dalek Wars, and that's why he's got a serious grudge against the Daleks. Really, wasn't that much of anything interesting about these people. So that kind of sucks a little bit. But let's move on to the other side of this story, the Exelons themselves. The Exelons themselves, much like the human characters, there's some substance there, but for the most part, not much. I mean, I do like Bilal, the character that the Exelon character that accompanies Sarah Jane and the Doctor for the majority of the story. I like Bilal. Unfortunately, other than him, there really aren't that many interesting or memorable Exelon characters. I mean, there are the high priests that almost sacrifice Sarah Jane and the Doctor, and you can kind of learn that there's some interesting history with the Exelons, especially with the high priests, and that there's like an underground movement of Exelons that want to destroy the city and dethrone the high priests. But you don't really get to see too much of it. You get to see Bilal and one else, and that's it. And that's all you really get from the Exelons. So design-wise, I really like the way the Exelons look. I mean, they really do capture that once great species that reverted back to primitive barbarism aesthetic with the design of the creatures. But other than that, I kind of wish we got to see a little bit more, learn about a little bit more about the Exelons. That being said, I feel like if we had, it would have had to have been a 6-parter, not a 4-parter. But I do like the monstrous roots that keep destroying the Daleks. The Daleks really do take a beating in this episode. A lot. I mean, there's probably a reason why it's called Death to the Daleks. I mean, more so than any other episode, none of the Daleks really do make it out alive. And I'm not the biggest fan of the design of these new Daleks. I think it's like a one-off. It was only ever used in this one episode and never seen or heard from again, as far as I know. But I do kind of like the fact that because of the energy drain on the planet made by the city, the Dalek energy weapons don't work, and so they have to revert into an alternative power source, which is like the projectile weapon. And I love that they just have that miniature TARDIS for target practice. I love that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, the Daleks are kind of pushovers in this episode. One of them literally blows up from having a nervous breakdown because there's all these creatures and he can't shoot them. He keeps saying exterminate, 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 until he blows up. There's another one that has another meltdown where he finds that the human prisoner he was supposed to be guarding has escaped, and so he just self-destructs. And there's Daleks being taken out by the city. I mean, like I said, this is the weakest that the Daleks have ever been. Like, these are paper Daleks. But yeah, they're not very threatening or menacing. The Daleks kind of lose a bit of their menacingness, mostly because they lose their weapons. So what are you gonna do? But yeah, it's not the Daleks' finest hour. But the main hook that this episode brings us is the city. I love the city. The city itself looks beautiful, and I love the contrast of it looking so beautiful and shiny and well constructed and very geometrically shaped. Contrast against the way the planet looks like. The planet looks desolate and gray and dirty and filthy and asymmetrical. And I really gotta look up where they filmed this episode. There's I think a guy on YouTube that just does actual filming locations for every Doctor Who episode, and there's a series. I haven't looked too much into that, but I think I should look into that, because the places that they shot this episode were striking, and the majority of the episode was filmed on location. You can tell from the scenery around it. But yeah, I love the contrast of the way the planet looks outside and the city inside and also outside the city. The city kind of, in many ways, it kind of reminds me of some ancient depictions of the city of Jerusalem for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it just looks similar. I don't know. But yeah, so the city itself really looks beautiful. And on the inside, I love that the city is basically just testing anyone who gets inside it, all these logic puzzles and assault on your mind and stuff like that. I love it, and I love how the reasoning of how the Doctor keeps getting one step ahead of the city. And there's that really interesting moment of there's someone looking at the monitor, and you think it's like someone watching the Doctor and Bilal and trying to figure out how to stop them. And then they enter the room and the guy just dissolves, and then you realize, oh yeah, he was actually dead for centuries, and the only thing that kept him alive was the vacuum, the lack of oxygen in the room. So that was pretty funny. So yeah, the Daleks get taken out by the end by the Dan Galloway character. Yeah, I remember the name, Dan Galloway. Turns out, even though he was the most unlikely, unworthy character to lead the group of humans, turns out he did the right thing at the end. So yeah, so good luck for the people of Earth trying to combat the space plague. And it's sad to see the city go, but unfortunately, for the mission to succeed, it had to go. That's really all I can say for this episode. I like it. I don't love it, but yeah, it's a Dalek episode, and it exists. So let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, everybody, goodbye. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.